Welcome to the TOEFL Listening section. In this section, you will listen to an academic lecture and then answer questions about what you heard. You may take notes while you listen. You will have time to review your notes before answering the questions. Listen to part of a lecture in a university class. You will hear the lecture only once, so listen carefully. After the lecture, you will answer some questions about what you heard. Some questions ask about the main ideas and supporting details. Other questions ask you to make inferences or connections between ideas. Answer each question based on what is stated or implied in the lecture.
Good morning, class. Today we will examine the silent film era and focus on early cinema techniques and storytelling that shaped modern film language. I will begin with technological constraints and how they influenced style. Early films used hand-cranked cameras and variable frame rates that produced a flicker and required projectionists to judge speed. Filmmakers compensated for the absence of synchronized sound with several techniques. Intertitles provided essential narrative information and dialogue, while live musical accompaniment supplied emotional cues and pacing. Editing became a central tool for storytelling. Edwin S. Porter in The Great Train Robbery introduced continuity editing, and D.W. Griffith expanded cross-cutting to build suspense and parallel action, as in longer narratives. Soviet directors developed montage theory and used rhythmic cuts to create meaning. Eisenstein and others demonstrated that collision of images could produce ideas and emotional response without words. Acting styles adapted to the medium. Performers use pantomime and expressive gesture to convey inner states, but innovators like Chaplin and Buster Keaton combined subtle facial expression with physical comedy and carefully timed movement. Mise-en-scène and set design carried psychological weight in many films. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is a prime example where distorted sets and painted shadows communicated madness and subjective experience. German Expressionist films such as Nosferatu used stark lighting and shadow to create mood. Filmmakers exploited chiaroscuro and oblique angles to suggest fear and alienation. Cinematography developed techniques now taken for granted. Long takes and tracking shots in Keaton films allowed complex choreography, while close-ups were used strategically to emphasize emotion or important objects. Color effects arrived through tinting and toning. Filmmakers and laboratories added color to specific scenes to indicate time of day or mood, so a night scene could be blue and a fire scene could be red. Several case studies illustrate these points. The Birth of a Nation showcased narrative scale and continuity editing. Battleship Potemkin demonstrated montage in the Odessa Steppes sequence. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari exemplified expressionist mise-en-scène. The star system also emerged in the silent era. Audiences came to the theater to see familiar faces and personalities, which affected how films were marketed and how performances were shaped for recognition without speech. Exhibition practice influenced the form of films. Local musicians improvised scores so the same film could feel different in different cities. Projection speed and musical choices altered pacing and audience interpretation. I want you to notice how technical limits forced creative solutions. Restricted camera mobility at first led to theatrical staging, but that pushed filmmakers to invent camera movements and editing patterns to tell complex stories. When I say that editors in the silent era learned to tell time with cuts, I mean that editing created rhythm and narrative tempo in place of spoken dialogue. In conclusion, the silent film era was a laboratory of form. Its techniques in editing, mise-en-scène, acting, and exhibition established conventions that persist even after sound became standard. For our next session, read the assigned scenes from The Great Train Robbery and the Odessa Steps sequence, and be prepared to discuss editing choices and viewer effects.
Listen again to part of the lecture, then answer the question.
When I say that editors in the silent era learned to tell time with cuts, I mean that editing created rhythm and narrative tempo in place of spoken dialogue.
This concludes the listening section. For more TOEFL practice tests and study materials, visit Spinta.org.